So when I was in high school, I had this really cool clique of friends. Had I would say 3 really, really good friends. And we did everything together. We were actually in a really cool pop punk band that we did shows with and stuff. It was really fun. We spent a lot of time together. Played really cool shows. We actually played, we opened up for a band at Headliners once. So that was a really cool experience. So we just spent a lot of time together, and I kind of had that whole rocker persona, high top shoes and tight pants and long hair. If you want proof, this is kind of what I looked like all the time. And that's not my natural hair. I straightened that every morning. It took me a half hour. Yeah, not many laughs there. So this is kind of what I looked like. I don't know how Liz saw anything in me. No, I'm just kidding. So I had this group of friends that I hung out with, did life together, and our personalities were completely different. So generally in a group of people, there tends to be an alpha, and my best friend out of the group, he was the alpha male. So we kind of just did everything he wanted to do. All of the ideas kind of funneled through him. And I am not the alpha kind of person. I'm very much I'll just let things go. I'll go with the flow. I don't fight too much. I think I've changed a little bit since then. But I just kind of went along with everything. And so really the ideas of the group and where we were going, what we were doing, what our interests were kind of funneled through this one person. And I just went along with it. And there was a time in my high school years, and I'll kind of get to that later, but there was a time where I realized, I kind of woke up and I'm who am I? I was confused about what I believed in. Was this really my belief, or was this just kind of the overall belief of the group? And I was just completely confused. I was starting to doubt everything we did, everything they told me. I was is this really how my life should be? I was told that I should do this. Is this really what I should do? And so I started to doubt everything that they told me, and I started to ask the question, what is the truth? What is the truth in my life? And so we see throughout the Gospel of John a whole bunch of examples of truth that we can find in Jesus. And in the Gospel of John, truth is mentioned 25 times. And in the other Gospels, they're mentioned a combined 3 or 4 times. And so the Gospel of John is very focused on the truth, right? The truth of Jesus and what he brings. And so to kind of go over that, the first chapter, we read, "The Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory as a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth." Later we see in chapter 3, he says, "Whoever has accepted his testimony has affirmed that God is true." He says to the Samaritan woman, "The hour is coming when the true worshipers will worship the Father in truth, in spirit, and in truth." He said to the Jews that had started to believe in him, that if you continue in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And on the night he was betrayed, he spoke the words to his disciples, "I am the way, I am the truth, and I am the life." And so we see plenty of instances in the Gospel of John where Jesus is telling us what this truth is for us to understand. But I don't think we'll ever quite be able to answer that question, what is truth, until we ask ourselves, who is the truth? Because truth, the real truth, is found in Jesus, and God has revealed himself through Jesus. And the best way to describe truth is right here, John 3:16. "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him may not perish, but may have eternal life." So Jesus' whole identity, everything he was, his words and his actions, his death and his resurrection, they all embodied truth. And so then we come to the point in our scripture lesson today where Jesus finds himself standing in front of Pilate, being brought by the Pharisees to Pilate, who was the Roman governor of Judea. And to kind of give you a background on Pilate, he really didn't have a good track record. He wasn't in good standing with Tiberius, the Roman emperor, and the Jewish people certainly did not like him. And he didn't like being in Jerusalem. He never liked to travel to Jerusalem. He only went to Jerusalem to kind of govern the people during these times of Passover festivals, big events, to avoid riots, to maintain the control of the people. And so the people that he controlled didn't respect him at all. So as you can imagine, one morning this whole crowd of people comes forward with this guy who supposedly deserves death for what he has been doing. And Pilate just gives in. He's like, okay, I'll take this guy in. I'll ask him a few questions. And Pilate, he's known for being cynical. He's a politician. He sees people in a different way. And I imagined at first, his first thought, really intentions of Jesus was, is this guy a rebel? Is he trying to form an uprising? He didn't know what was going on here. And so he was gauging Jesus. And if you read the Gospel of John, Pilate is actually kind of defensive at first. When Pilate asks Jesus, he says, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And Jesus says, "Are you asking me on your own or from what others have said?" And Pilate, this is where he kind of gets defensive. He's like, "I'm not a Jew. Your own nation has turned you over to me. What have you done?" And the truth is, it's not what Jesus has done. It's who he is and what he represents. He was a threat to the establishment, to Judaism, right? He was a threat. And after reading the four Gospels, it's pretty clear that Pilate had a pretty good idea that Jesus was innocent, that he didn't want any part of this. He washed his hands clean of this. And we see throughout the Bible the significance of the number 3. And Pastor Steve touched on it last week with Peter denying Jesus 3 times. And then Jesus, after he had resurrected, approached Peter and asked him 3 times, "Do you love me?" And that's just one instance of 3 being in the Bible. But in this passage, actually, and I'm not sure which other gospel, I think Luke, Pilate says a particular phrase 3 times. And on 3 different occasions, Pilate says, "I find no grounds for charging him." And so in the midst of all this political pressure Pilate's facing, because he needs to please the emperor, and he doesn't want a crazy riot and an uprising with the Jewish people, he caved. He gave the Jews what they wanted, the high priests that were leading the charge of this claim, right? And so Pilate failed. He failed to control the people. He turned a blind eye to the truth. And this is where I think we share a lot in common with Pilate. Because there's so many times in our lives where we know what's right. We know what the right thing to do is, but we continually choose to do the wrong thing. Because usually the right thing to do is maybe the harder thing to do. So we choose to do the wrong thing. And our culture has a real problem with truth. We live in a time of fake news and misleading headlines. There's actually an article in the Washington Post that was just sent out this week. It's a study about fake news. And I think it's talking about Twitter in specific, how on Twitter, fake news is dominating the platform. It goes on to say that an article that contains fake news has 70% chance, a higher chance, to be retweeted, for someone to repost it on their page. 70% chance. Our culture loves this fake news. It goes on to say that the average truthful tweet reaches about 1,000 people. The average fake news tweet reaches about 100,000 people. So people are constantly fed, our culture is fed on this fake news, right? We don't know what's true anymore. We don't know what we read is true or not. And fake news has been around since the beginning of humanity. Actually, if you read the Gospel of Matthew, once Jesus is resurrected and people are starting to find out that he's resurrected, the Pharisees actually, they pay the Roman officials, they start to pay people to spread fake news. They tell these people to say that Jesus was actually stolen by the disciples from the tomb. And so it actually says in Matthew, if I turn to it real quick, it says they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, and they told them, say this, that his disciples came during the night and stole him while we were sleeping. If this reaches the governor's ears, we will deal with it. We will deal with him and keep you out of trouble. So they took the money and did as they were instructed, and the story has been spread among the Jewish people to this day. Fake news, right? Fake news. And also our culture, it promotes individualism. So it promotes that me, myself, what I feel and what I believe, that is all that matters. What I believe to be true is true, no matter what anyone says. I'm a free thinker. Some say I'm one with the world, right? Be true to yourself. So the person that thinks that way, everything they believe is true to them. And if somebody else maybe has a different angle on that truth or has something that's not that truth, they'll probably get offended and post on Twitter. But that's the culture we live in. We don't want to hear other people's views and opinions. And there's this professor, Dr. Tony Everett, who uses this diagram. Says that this box illustrates that yes, there's truth in everything, but the perspectives of the truth are different. So I see this differently than maybe you see this, but there is truth at the center, right? And our culture, they don't like to see a different viewpoint. They want theirs to be the only view, right? And this is my favorite quote. I guess it's from Pinterest. But this is a really cool quote. It says, "The truth sounds like hate to those who hate the truth." I love that. It's so true. The truth sounds like hate to those who hate the truth. And in this next image, if you can't see it, there's two people standing over. From one side is a 6, and the other side it's a 9. In the words they say, one of these people is wrong. Someone painted a 6 or a 9, and they need to back up and orient themselves, see if there are any other numbers to align with. Maybe there's a driveway or a building to face, or they can ask someone who actually knows. People having an uninformed opinion about something they don't understand and proclaiming their opinion as being equally valid as facts is what's ruining the world. No one wants to do any research. They just want to be right. I read a commentary this week, and it said, and I quote, "We tend to believe things that people we trust tell us. We tend to doubt things that people we don't trust tell us. But it's possible that the info from our non-trusted source is right, and the info from our trusted source is wrong. And we don't start with that assumption. In today's world of fake news, we don't entertain that notion. We write people off immediately. We live in a bubble of our own making, and in the process, we cut ourselves off from not only the information, but from the people. We cut ourselves off from the people. We live in our own bubble. And we all bring baggage to relationships. We all have our struggles. We all have these truths about our lives that we don't want to tell people. We think that they're dangerous, so we cover them up. We run away with them. And so getting back to my high school story, the summer between my junior and senior year, with my whole awesome, cool makeup, I was selected to sing in the All-Ohio Youth Choir, and they actually sing, it's an 18-day, choir camp. Pretty cool. And so it's an 18-day camp, and they actually sing at the Ohio State Fair. I don't know if anyone here has been to the Ohio State Fair, but that choir there, they have a choir and a band. That is the choir that I'm talking about. They sing a bunch of songs, a bunch of concerts. It's exhausting. But the people there are phenomenal. And it was during this 18-day camp when I realized that, these people, these are like real friends. I was able to talk to them. I had my own opinion. I shared my beliefs. They shared their beliefs. And the relationships were just so different than what I was used to in my relationships at home with my friends, who I thought that they were my friends. And so I came home and I felt completely different. I didn't want to be the person who I was at home, right? And so actually, that fall, I officially removed those people from my life. And one day I showed up to school. So I had my long hair for a while. And I showed up to school one day and I buzzed it all off. Rebel. And these guys were so mad at me. You should have seen these guys. I don't know if I don't think I sat at their lunch table anymore. I'm pretty sure that's what. So I was why did you do that? I just wanted to be my own person. They were always told me, this band is going to be great. We're going to sign a label. We're going to go on a tour. You don't need to go to college right now. And thankfully from that camp, I was able to kind of rediscover, and I was learning the truth about myself, right? What they were saying wasn't the truth. And so when I found out the real truth about myself, I felt free, right? The truth will set you free. And relationships is what holds truth together. And it starts with our relationship with Jesus, right? Jesus is truth. Truth starts and ends with Jesus. And he makes truth something the world is not familiar with. Not familiar with whatsoever. Truth is something we belong to. It claims us. It takes us in. Truth is a place where we find the stability in our lives. And if that truth is not the truth, it still does this, right? It still claims you. You believe it to be true, but it might not be true. God's truth is what gives us a new life and a new perspective, and we're transformed. Because what we find in this world, the culture it's grounded in power and in fear. And if you read the Gospels, Pilate was grounded in power. He had all the power, but he was completely grounded in fear. He was fearful of what the emperor would do if he made the wrong choice here. He was fearful of what the Jewish people would have done if he did not give in, right? What would have happened? Uproar. And Pilate, when he asked this question to Jesus, what is truth? That's the end of it in the Gospel of John. If you don't read on from there, the dialogue is cut off. It's ended. We don't know what happens after that. Maybe Pilate just loses interest. Maybe he knew at that very moment, he knew the truth, but he just wanted to look away. It was already determined what he was going to do to Jesus. But today, we all have a choice. We have a choice today to know the truth, to not look away from the truth. Instead, we should testify. We should testify to the truth we find in Jesus every day of our lives. And if you're someone who hasn't responded to that truth, maybe you would consider yourself a non-believer, or you consider yourself kind of just stagnant right now, you don't know, just kind of just treading water, right? You still have a choice today. It's not too late to embrace the truth, to accept the truth. And the truth that we find in God will transform us, and it will save us. And so as long as we belong to Jesus, we belong to the truth. Please pray with me.